So thank you everyone for coming today. We understand that there's a lot going on in life right now, and we really appreciate you taking the time to learn about great opportunity for your future and to meet with an awesome recruiter. My name is Kelsey Nager, and I am the Employer Experience Coordinator for the Career Development Center at USD. So I work with employers to get them on campus or virtually for info sessions, career fairs, and on-campus interviews. And we're really excited to have Rachel Sato with us today from Peace Corps. So I'll hand it off to her. Rachel just sent out a link to everyone to sign up for um, more information that she can follow up with you about. So make sure to fill out her document. If you're having trouble copy pasting it from your device, that's totally fine. We'll send it out at the end as well. And then I will also be sending a link at the end for your CRP, so Compass Passport Connect points. And that will also be in the follow-up email too, in case you're having trouble copy pasting, because I have learned that some devices will not allow you to. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it off to Rachel, and she has some great information for all of you.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, for that introduction. And just as a heads up, my Wi-Fi seems to be a little bit finicky. So if at any time I do get, if the connection isn't really that well, Kelsey, if you want to just let me know, or chat, just let me know if you wanted me to repeat anything. So thank you again so much, everyone, for being here today. And I understand that this is such a unique time that we are in, and I hope that you are able to just get a lot of benefit from this session. And I'm going to close my door since there's an airplane going right over quick. And again, my name is Rachel, and I'm the regional recruiter for Peace Corps based here in San Diego. I have done so many awesome info sessions with great folks at the Career Center at University of San Diego. I love chatting with the Toreros and just really, truly enjoy meeting with students who are potentially thinking about doing something like Peace Corps after their graduation or sometime in the future. And actually, with that said, let me go ahead and share my screen. The link in the chat box, that is to check in as an attendee, and this way I will be able to follow up with you all, whether you have more additional questions regarding Peace Corps or would like resume reviews, assist by any help on the application process. That is what I'm here for you. So please do, I understand it's not hyperlinked, but go ahead and follow that link. I will also share that in the email as a follow-up, so you can do that as well. And throughout the presentation, if any of you do have any questions, feel free to type that in the chat box, and then I will be addressing the questions. Is the presentation showing up, Kelsey? Perfect. There we go. Oh, you know what? I cannot do the poll before. Oh, I see. Okay. So we are actually starting off. Bear with me here, as this is actually my first time to really host a Zoom session. But we do have a poll just to kind of see if you have all, how you have all heard about Peace Corps before. There it is. We have 27 people. Let's wait for 3 more people to reach that 30 if possible. 29 out of 30. Is there one more person? Going once, going twice. All right. I'll go ahead and share these with you. Wonderful. So these are great answers. Wow, we have a lot of folks who actually heard Peace Corps through a friend or family or coworker. We have 8 folks who know someone who has served. That's wonderful. about 8 people who have heard from media, and then 5 folks are first time hearing about it. So that is fantastic. I love hearing about people who have heard it from a loved one or a professor or a friend that may also be abroad. So these are wonderful to hear. Thank you all so much for submitting those. Let's see here. All right. So just to start things off, to let you all know and to be really transparent about our current situation in the midst of COVID-19, we have evacuated all volunteers with a very difficult decision in doing so, but due to the safety and security concerns in regards to our volunteers, we evacuated volunteers from our posts. And with that said, we are definitely hoping to send those evacuees back to their posts and to their countries of service, hopefully later this year, really depending on how the situation settles. Our upper leadership team in Washington, D.C. are definitely monitoring the situation. So we are definitely hoping to hit the ground running after, on the behalf of, taking a look at the host country health and safety, as well as within the United States as well. So I know that we have had a lot of questions coming in from candidates who have wondered if this a premonition of what might happen to Peace Corps in the future, and case at all. We definitely have a very strong bipartisan support with Peace Corps. So definitely hoping to kickstart and re-enter the evacuees along with the invitees, the candidates who have been nominated to serve as Peace Corps volunteers and in the upcoming year. So our actual soonest departure date at this moment will be January to March of 2021. Okay. So along with the news of this, I am also, my heart and soul is with Peace Corps, not only because I'm for Peace Corps, but I also served as a Peace Corps volunteer myself. I was in the beautiful land of Nepal between 2015 to 2017. During my time as a Peace Corps volunteer, I was able to work within the health sector as well as agriculture. There was a little bit of a cross sector going on during that time. So it was a little bit of a unique experience, both covering the agriculture methods and working with farmers, as well as working within the health field. So I was able to do a lot of different projects in dental health and hygiene, hand washing and sanitation projects, working with the local mothers groups and the community groups on nutrition education, and also mostly maternal health and child health as well. I personally don't have any experience in health prior to becoming a volunteer. I was a sociology major, and I was definitely in the shoes that you are all in today too. I'm sure steps and tying in that degree with a career that you will feel most beneficial with, and that aligns with your mission to serve, and with also your background and experiences. So again, I do not have any experience in health. I was able to get trained on all of these professional development, as well as the training from Peace Corps when I first arrived to Nepal. So in this picture here, just really quickly going through this, on the top photo there, you will see that is the view from my village in Nepal. It is a landlocked country between India and China. And in the hills in the distance, that is the Himalayan mountains. So just a beautiful way to start the day on most of those days when we did have crisp air, and more in the chilly. And then winter times was actually an easier view to see that, but that was my village. And in the very bottom picture is just another picture from a training that I did with a local public school, and we were doing dental hygiene workshop there. Moving on to the mission of Peace Corps. Peace Corps was founded in 1961 by John F. Kennedy. We have really been strong for the last almost 60 years now, promoting Peace Corps and what Peace Corps stands for. So essentially, when JFK established this agency, his goal was really to promote world peace and friendship, and it was really done by fulfilling these 3 goals: to help the people of interested countries in meeting their need for trained women and men. And this is a really important point, because for the Peace Corps volunteers, we are only invited to the countries that are requesting our need and assistance. So over the years, there has been such a strong partnership program with our host country nationals, with the counterparts, along with the Peace Corps headquarters. And so we're constantly looking for qualified candidates, those candidates who are willing to serve overseas for a total of 27 months. And we are really there also for a two-way street. And what I mean by that is sustainability as well as friendship building is a very strong overlying concept of what makes Peace Corps strong, right? Because it is for a total of 27 months. So there's going to be a lot of network building as well as for volunteers to learn about what are the sustainable projects that can happen in their community. In what ways can they make an impact? In what ways can they work with their host country nationals or the schools or the teachers or the health clinic staff members into carrying out their program? And how can they adapt those programs even after a volunteer departs, after those 27 months of service is completed? So we are really there to promote world peace, but also really the sustainable projects that can go on forward to better uplift that community. Also, number two is to help promote a better understanding of Americans and the parts of people served. So, for example, when I was in my village in Nepal, I was one of the very first Peace Corps volunteers to be back in my village after about a 30-year hiatus. Back in the 60s, all the way till the early 2000s, I believe, we did have a lot of education volunteers that were in my village, but it was close to, I think, about 20 years or so before they had another volunteer. So again, it was a lot of conversation on what Peace Corps is, also tied into my identity as an Asian American volunteer representing the United States. There was a lot of conversation on identity, cultural backgrounds. So for many of you as well who enter these villages, you may be the very first volunteer or the foreigner that they will ever come across. So in that sense, you are also a cultural ambassador of the United States. And finally, to help promote a better understanding of your host country on the behalf of Americans. So what better opportunity is there as a volunteer to share the practices and the culture and the life practice of the folks, the community that you are with back home, whether it's through blogs or Facebook posts or YouTube videos, right? There are so many different ways to share what you have learned as a volunteer living in the community that you call home for the 2 years back with your friends and family. We also have a lot of volunteers who have had friends and family come visit them during their service as well, which just makes a wonderful avenue for cross-cultural exchange. So just really quickly here, some of the minimum requirements to be a Peace Corps volunteer is to be a US citizen and at least 18 years old. It is actually really interesting to see all these stats because we do have about definitely over 7,500 mark now, 7,500 current volunteers that are serving in their community anytime in the year. At the moment, we have about 250,000 return volunteers as well. So we do have a very strong network of folks who will be able to be there, you know, with the transition back into the United States. We do have a very strong network of returned Peace Corps volunteers as well. We have about 95% of volunteers who do have an undergrad degree. This will be something I definitely encourage a lot of candidates to pursue is, you know, to finish their bachelor's degree prior to becoming a volunteer. We do have some programs that also provide an alternative. They do take into account candidates who may not have a bachelor's degree, but you can also compensate that by utilizing your professional experience. If any of you are getting your associate's degree, you can have a combination of an associate's degree along with 2 years of professional working experience as well. But again, I do encourage those of you to keep going with getting your bachelor's degree because that will open up a lot more programs that you'll be able to qualify for and to be more competitive in this process. We also have one of our oldest volunteers who is, I believe, an 86-year-old woman, and she has served in 3 different countries as a Peace Corps volunteer. So we call her kind of the Peace Corps guru here. But as you can see here, we do not have an upper age limit with Peace Corps. So for those of you who might have a friend or a family member that is interested in serving, please let them know that, hey, there's no upper age limit if you want to be a volunteer again or be a volunteer. So very quickly here as well, benefits during service. Because Peace Corps, it is a government agency, there is no cost associated with becoming a volunteer. And rather, you will be receiving a living stipend. And this living stipend can definitely vary country to country. It is pretty much adjusted to the country's living standard. So this living stipend is really a monthly stipend that you'll be receiving. It can vary anywhere between $200 a month to $450 a month. So it's not enough to book a ticket to France or to go to that Coachella concert, but it is enough to sustain yourself throughout those 2 years, as well as definitely enough amount of sum to do a little bit of traveling within the country as well. I believe when I was in Nepal, I actually had about $180 a month for my living stipend, but with that, I was able to pay for food and for housing and for food towards my host family, and still have enough left to do a little bit of traveling in Nepal. Housing is also all covered for by Peace Corps. Peace Corps staff in these host countries will be arranging your finding a host homestay family for you, so there's no need in finding a place to stay. Most of our programs do have a 2-year commitment with staying with a host family throughout those 2 years. Very few of our programs might have the ability to live on your own, but I definitely highly encourage you all to consider living with a host family, because again, that is another big piece of that community integration piece that you'll be getting as a volunteer. You will be medically covered, and dental coverage is there for you throughout your entire time as a volunteer. This one is a very big one. The student loan deferment is also provided throughout those full 27 months. And for any of you that may have a federal loan coming in from your undergrad, as long as you provide your your nomination letter to Peace Corps up on the portal, then they will be able to just utilize that immediately from your entry of service date. So the student loan deferment means essentially you are not making any payments on your student loans during the entire 2.5 years. And even when you are adjusting back into the United States or following your service, there is an income-driven repayment plan as well, since we understand a lot of volunteers might want to travel for a little bit or may not be re-entering right into the workforce. So for that cushion period of time, you do qualify to also apply for the income-driven repayment plan, and that can also be a very low sum as well. You will also be receiving vacation time while you are there as a volunteer. So altogether, you will have 48 days of vacation days. It is pretty much 2 days of annual leave that will get accrued every month. And so this begins after the 3-month training is completed. So I usually tell folks to think about taking a vacation maybe 8 months into their service, maybe wait a year or a year and a half, so that you can really utilize that chunk of vacation days as well. Along those lines, I do want to let you all know that you will have weekends that are fairly much your time to go visit your friends or other volunteers. Use that for your own personal me time as well. So the work layout of Peace Corps is not necessarily like a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. It is very different from that concept, but you will definitely have vacation time as well and personal leave days. Most of the time as well, the national holidays in that host country, as well as Christmas and Thanksgiving, are all going to be holidays for you to use too. So definitely enough time to kind of explore your country without having to wait for those vacation times to accumulate. Career skills and training. During your time as a Peace Corps volunteer, you will have multitude of ways to really enhance your career skills and training. When you first arrive to the country, again, as I mentioned a little bit before, the 3 months is going to be a huge chunk of language development, language training essentially in the mornings, and then in the afternoon, you will be getting a multitude of cultural training as well as the technical training. And throughout your 2 years as a volunteer, you will also have access to take grant writing workshops, project management workshops as well. And essentially you can do grant writing as well and fund the projects that you want to get funded while you are there. This is a really big piece, I think, with Peace Corps, because I think a lot of folks, myself included, prior to becoming a volunteer, I did not notice that there will be a multitude of these career skills and training that would happen over the 2.5 years. I was also involved in a committee during my time as in Nepal for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee as well. There's Youth and Development Community as well as Gender and Development. So there's really a whole lot of things that you can get involved in and take advantage of. All right, this is really a colorful map here. You can kind of look at where we are currently serving. This map, I apologize, it is a little bit outdated. I believe it's from 2016, so we'll need a new one here pretty soon. But we are not in Nicaragua and China anymore, but we have added a few more new countries in Sri Lanka, Montenegro, and there was another one. But you can kind of see here all the beautiful places that our volunteers are serving in. And feel free to, in the chat box, type in some of those countries that you might be interested in or the regions. I don't think I can view the chat box at the moment, but I would love to kind of look at what you all had to say about this. And also, one thing to note, for any of you that might have a prior language knowledge, especially any Romance languages or French or Spanish, those countries in Latin America, I would say all of those do have a Spanish requirement, meaning if you have taken 2 semesters of college level Spanish, then you can utilize those requirements to enter into a Latin American post. If any of you are obviously like native or bilingual speakers, then no worries on that either. But I did want to mention that you can also apply to those countries that do have a language requirement as well. And again, those are if you have taken 2 college semesters of that language or 4 years of high school in the last 8 years. Okay, how are we doing with time? We're doing good, I think. These are the program area concentrations that we have. We are in over 6 sectors here. And we also have a potential path with a lot of volunteers utilizing their primary projects as well as doing their secondary projects. Let me first go into the 6 sectors and then we will touch base a little bit more on what those secondary projects can be. Essentially, so our agriculture programs, a lot of our volunteers in this program work with community farmers, small business owners as well. It is essentially providing improved agricultural methods and working with those stakeholders and those counterparts to provide training and outreach and to really utilize that space to whether it is improving some fruit tree layering or creating an off-seasonal vegetable production. There are various things that definitely a lot of our agriculture volunteers do in these capacities. It is also really tied in to health as well. Let me just jump over to the health sector as well, because health, again, as I mentioned before, you know, there's a lot of pieces of working with the community village members on nutrition education. And that might also mean to diversify their garden and their land into incorporating more varieties of healthy produce and so on and so forth. A lot of our health volunteers do work in areas of HIV/AIDS awareness and education, again, nutrition education, doing malaria prevention as well. And it is really more of a public health and outreach scope. We don't necessarily have volunteers that work there to do any treatments or working with the patients necessarily. It is really more so the public health, educational and awareness practices. Youth and development, this sector is a lot of wonderful programs in this one as well. We don't have too many of this. I know that a lot of our candidates do tend to get really interested in jumping into the youth and development one. But essentially, I would say also there's so much potential to work with youth regardless of the sector that you are in. And I say this because again, there's just so much that you can do, whether it's the youth empowerment camps, or whether you're teaching English as you are there as a health volunteer. There are so many ways that you can definitely incorporate youth as your audience as well. But for this sector specifically, a lot of our volunteers do work with various nonprofit organizations in their community that might be working on leadership development, public speaking. Perhaps they are addressing issues with youth who may not be employed or having a difficult time finding employment in their communities respectively. So a lot of entrepreneurial skills that you can also establish with the youth. Again, there's just so much overlap with all these sectors, but a lot of our youth and development volunteers also work with health, really working with the community that can be impacted with HIV/AIDS. So again, utilizing those spheres along with the other nonprofit organizations on betterment and just overall awareness and prevention. Education, this one is a little bit more, I would say, focused on being in a structured setting. In comparison to all our remaining 6 sectors, education is a little more specific, that you are going to be reporting to a school. That can actually end up being 5 days a week or 6 days a week, really depending on the academic structure of that school. A lot of our education program volunteers get to do co-teaching, curriculum development. You might also be a TEFL teacher as well as really working with the classes that you have over the 2 years on English grammar, conversation, and just really doing some really great stuff there. I think education and health is one of our 2 bigger programs, only because again, a lot of our posts definitely encourage volunteers to be teachers. So we do have those 2 big sectors there, but we definitely have all these amazing 6 sectors that can use volunteer help. Also, one more thing, I'm sorry, for the education, we do have math and science teaching programs as well. So for any of you that may have a STEM degree and are interested in teaching, that could be a great sector for you as well. All right, we have 2 more sectors to go through. So environment. Environment is, again, a lot of overall awareness and education. A lot of our environmental volunteers do work on coastal resource projects, environmental education, whether they are there as a teacher or working with the youth organizations on promoting environment concepts. A lot of our folks who have an environmental science degree or environmental education, they do tend to apply directly to the environment sector. But again, there's really a little bit more of a flexibility throughout all of our sectors, regardless of your major. If, for example, if some of you are a sociology major but have worked on coastal cleanups or involved on an environmental student organization on campus, then those skills can also be utilized towards a sector as well. So do not be discouraged if any of you may not have an environmental science degree but are interested in environment. We can definitely supplement that, and we can work together as well to see what additional experiences that you can acquire. And we already did health. And finally, community economic development, that is really business for short. A lot of our business volunteers here work with small business owners, again, promoting those entrepreneur skills, financial bookkeeping, establishing business, so that will also be a sustainability aspect and an income generation aspect for the member of the household that can hopefully impact their surroundings as well. Finally, secondary projects. This is really where we have our volunteers that matches their interests and their skills and experiences with the need of the community. So this is really essentially what you want to do, as long as there is a community need for that as well. And for example, a lot of our volunteers who are health education volunteers, because you are exposed to such a big audience, and with students, a lot of them do after school activities, whether it's playing volleyball or playing soccer and doing HIV/AIDS awareness throughout that as well. A lot of people also do create like community libraries, if you get any funding for that, perhaps donating computers to the school or creating a library in the village. I'm noticing I'm talking a lot about education here, but there's definitely a lot of different things that you can do. And essentially, because you are there for those 2.5 years, we do want to make sure that you have a way to also do some fun and creative stuff too for that time. Benefits after serving. So we actually have a lot of wonderful benefits for our returnees, and we have more than $10,000 in transitional funds. Yes, that number did go up since the last time I served. So it is $10,000 now. That is entirely for you to use however you like, whether it is to do a little bit of traveling after Peace Corps, or perhaps you are trying to find transportation or an apartment back home. So that is entirely for you to use however you like. Graduate school benefits. This is another wonderful benefit that I will also be utilizing here pretty soon. But essentially, we have over 200 partner schools nationwide that are providing tuition discounts and an application fee waiver for our Return Peace Corps volunteers. This, if we have time at the end, I will show you all the website for this, but it is called the Coverdell Fellows Program, and you can actually view, even at the moment, what type of programs that we have. We have over 200 schools, so it's fun to kind of shop around and to potentially start thinking about grad school and plan this out with your Peace Corps service as well. Again, professional networking and career services. With the number of return volunteers that we have, that is definitely a great place for networking. Perhaps some of you are looking into government jobs and working with USAID or Foreign Service, or maybe connecting with the embassies in these local countries respectively. You will never know how many Return Peace Corps volunteers are there, because I have been blown away with the number of Return Peace Corps volunteers that we have in these working spaces. So that is a wonderful avenue for networking, or just hearing about their time as transitioning from Peace Corps service into federal employment, or it doesn't even have to be federal, it can be a private corporation, and how their experiences was. And federal employment advantages. This is where we have a 1-year non-competitive eligibility status. We call it NCE for short. We love acronyms. And this NCE status will allow you to apply for federal jobs with an advantage over the other applicants that has applied with you. I would say this NCE status, it is good for about a whole year after you complete your service. So it might be a good time for those of you who might be interested in federal employment, you can navigate to usajobs.gov and check out some of those posts that might also utilize this status, so you can kind of keep a lookout for which jobs you might want to apply to after your service as a Peace Corps volunteer. All right, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. This is a little bit difficult to explain since it's a little bit, it can get a little bit complicating, but essentially what happens is it is a forgiveness repayment plan where, as a Peace Corps volunteer, your 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer would count towards this loan forgiveness plan. And the loan forgiveness itself, if you are making on-time payments for a total of 10 years, it does not have to be cumulative, but throughout those 10 years, if you are working as in the nonprofit sector, as a teacher or a government worker, then as long as you're making on-time payments throughout those 10 years, after the 10 years is finished, then all the loans will be forgiven. And finally, Peace Corps volunteer service counts towards 2 of those. So essentially you only have 8 years to do, to make those payments, and then that will be counted as forgiven. I can also talk a little more about that later if that was a little bit confusing, but that's another wonderful benefit that we have as well. Let me come back to this page, as I do want to cover a little bit more of the application process and leave room at the end for questions too. So again, our seamless application process here. Applying is very easy to do. As far as our current portal, again, we are having departures next year from January to March, but at any time that you're interested in applying, you can look at our programs online, browse through our current openings. You can only apply to 1 position at a time. And so you will notice on our website that we will have specific programs that you can apply to directly, whether it is a business advising volunteer in Panama. You can select that position, and it will expand to a full job description pretty much of showing you what they're looking for, what the requirements are, as well as when the application deadline is. Or the other way of applying for Peace Corps is doing the serve where needed most option. And that is another way to apply for Peace Corps, indicating your flexibility. If you're fairly, if you're looking at those programs and you're like, I'm fairly open to anything within education and health, then you can also select off those preferences as you are doing your serve where needed most option. So again, you can select your preferences, whether it be a sector preference or a regional preference, so that once our Peace Corps placement officers receive your application, they will be able to match you up with the programs that could be a good fit for you. Once you apply to our programs, whether it be a specific program or that serve where needed, it only really takes about an hour from what I've heard. Even at the moment, actually, all you really need when you are applying for Peace Corps are 3 contacts for references. So just their full name and their email address. No need for letters of recommendation for Peace Corps. As well as your resume and a motivational statement responding to one of our prompts that we have. This prompt is really asking you, what is your why are you interested in Peace Corps service? And what are some of the challenges that you foresee yourself going through, and how do you plan on mitigating those? So really easy to do, very just straight to the point. And after you complete your application, you'll be getting a health history form. Again, this is the part where I really tell candidates to be flexible, because with all of our various countries that we have, there could be some health history background that may not be suitable for a country, but that's suitable for another country. For example, I had a candidate recently who applied to Thailand, and in her health history form, they had peanut allergies. So the Peace Corps placement officer got back to her saying, we would be willing to relocate to another country because a lot of our food based in Thailand is made out of peanuts. So again, that type of conversation could happen. If that does happen, again, please do indicate your flexibility throughout this process, because we really want to have volunteers well acclimated into that community, and health and safety is our priority with that. Finally, the interview, when you are selected for an interview, it is all video conferencing. So no need to fly into anywhere, a specific location to meet with the Peace Corps placement officers. It will be a one-on-one interview, and it can last anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes. But those questions are really a behavioral-based interview as well. So for those of you that might be on the call today, if you do have any questions about interview prep, or just an overall, a mock interview practice run, then I would be happy to schedule that with you as well. The last 4 points here is really just the overall flow of how things go. Anywhere from from number 1 to 4, those take within 2 months of applying for Peace Corps. So again, it does take about 6 to 9 months to depart for our programs, and that's usually the normal case. Right now, because of this current situation, we are looking at I would say about 9 months to 1 year departures. But for those of you who perhaps are seniors, we do have a July 1st deadline coming up, and following that will be October 1st with all different staggering departure dates. So again, in the remaining, after those 2 months and after your interview is completed, those remaining months is going to be medical and legal clearance. You will be getting your visa, doing some onboarding training as well, just to get you well versed in the Peace Corps as an agency, what type of support is available. And that's actually really an exciting time. The 5 to 8 is like, it's a long period, but it's also really exciting when you finally get that nomination letter. So again, just to kind of show you really quickly here what our programs look like. Whenever you do browse to that peacecorps.gov/openings page, you will see a variety of projects that we are currently asking that have a request for volunteers. And the great thing about this is that you can also sort through those filters. So on the right-hand side there, you'll notice, again, the sectors and the language requirement. You will notice that we do have a lot of projects that do not have a language requirement as well. So you can filter through those as well and to find a project that you might be interested in. Anytime that you see it featured on the position, this is really where we are looking for candidates to apply directly. And the reasons that it can become featured really does not have a reflection on the project itself. It's not because it's not popular or something, but it really is the situation we mostly get is if they are looking for a specific candidate with perhaps a STEM degree that can speak French, or as you can see here, a lot of times our business sector and the agriculture sector do tend to get featured because we are looking for a specific candidate that has some more experience in the business or with nutrition gardening, organic gardening, so on and so forth. This is where the page looks like for the serve where you are needed most. And this is, again, another great way to go. This is actually how I applied for Peace Corps as well. And the options to apply directly only started about 2 or 3 years ago. So this is essentially kind of where Peace Corps started for me, was applying, really, take me wherever is needed most, and I will be a volunteer. So again, for those of you who might be interested in this, I definitely encourage you to reach out to me and we can talk more about how this process works. But you can also indicate your preferences while you're doing this too. So do not worry too much if this might seem a little bit too much. All right, so just an overview of kind of how our application timing works. You will see here that, again, we do have a July 1st apply by date for departures happening next year. And then no by date is, as well. Again, the 2-month period is when you will have a scheduled interview with your placement officers. I'm sorry, just one placement officer, and then you'll find out if you have been nominated for that program and the project. Just some quick tips here. Applying early never hurts. Just with anything in life, it's always good to kind of start this process early and just really, get your application items together. I can only imagine how much call today, and we are here for your support, whether it's with Kelsey at Career Services Department or recruiters such as myself. Like, we're here to support you. So it's totally fine to have more than one option as well of figuring out what to do after graduation. And again, please do not hesitate to reach out to the resources that you have available. Again, as your recruiter, I would be more than happy to take a look at your resume. If you're looking at Peace Corps as kind of a general sense of, okay, this kind of sounds interesting, I just do not know what I want to do yet. Even at that point, please feel free to reach out to me. I would be more than happy to explore some of the programs with you and kind of get to know you better as an applicant too, and find out the project that might be of interest. And also, we do have 70 recruiters nationwide. So I know that you're all here in San Diego, but if anytime you do move across the country, maybe you're staying at your parents' house in Wisconsin or something, then you can also reach out to a recruiter near you, join some of their events. Okay, let me also just go back real quickly. Safety and security. Oops, sorry about that. I just wanted to kind of leave this at the end because I think it's just, with all that's going on, I did want to make sure I covered this part as well. And safety and health abroad, again, you are going to get full medical coverage and dental health as well. So while that coverage is for you during your Peace Corps service, we have medical officers available 7. All of our Peace members are made up of a doctor as well as a nurse. So they are fully trained health technicians as well. You will be getting an emergency as well as a health kit to bring with you in the village. A lot of these times, those kits can be filled with, what is it called? Some antibiotics, a thermometer, basic first aid kit as well. But again, like, that is there for you, as well as the medical officers will provide you the nearest hospital to go to in case you do have an emergency. And there is a bigger facility in some of these capitals that are, dedicated for Peace Corps volunteers as well, so that they have resources there. Security officers. This is another staff member that Peace Corps staff has. Safety and security officers, their title. They are really there to, again, provide any insight. A lot of times as a volunteer, perhaps you are traveling to another volunteer's house and you're curious to see if there's any road closures or anything of that sort. The security officers will also let volunteers know if there's any situations with that, any road closures or even a political strike. Those things are really there for us to hear about as volunteers. So security officers are definitely there for you. Overall, we have such wonderful trained staff. The Peace Corps host country staff members have been just an amazing group of people that really, really are dedicated to the Peace Corps mission, as well as the support for our volunteers. We already talked about community immersion training, government support. A lot of times, well, as you can see right now with this current situation, we were in touch with the embassies in these host countries, as well as Peace Corps headquarters, and really abiding by the CDC guidelines as well. So a lot of times, knocking on wood, if there was any sort of a political situation, a natural disaster, or a pandemic like this case, then all these elements do come together to make sure that we mitigate and take the necessary steps. And finally, dedicated victim advocacy. This is for any volunteers who would rather reach out to find support if they have any sort of disruption with their host family, or if they come across any conflict that they might go across. And the victim advocacy group, they're actually a group of people that are there via phone support. So you can call them and remain anonymous. And that's a support that is provided as well. So definitely just, again, a lot of support that goes both for staff members as well as your other peers. The biggest thing for me that I found support in was connecting with my Peace Corps volunteer friends. So I did want to let you all know of that as well. And finally, here is my information. Please do not hesitate to reach out. You can email me directly or give me a call. That is my mobile phone number. And again, in the chat box, I did, for those of you who may have hopped in a little bit later, I did provide a link for this event so that you can also be in contact following this presentation. For now, I will go ahead and pause this. I will keep this slide up, but let me go to the chat box here. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type it in or unmute yourself and ask those questions as well.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank
yes.
you.
Everyone feed your questions into the chat room. I'm also gonna post the CRP form and I'll send this form as well as Rachel's form and Rachel's contact information in a follow-up email in case you can't copy paste from your device at this time. But please utilize Rachel while she's here and get your questions answered.
Actually, Kelsey, I have a quick question for you. Do you know if I'm able to get to the chat function, or is it just I'll just have to stop sharing the screen to get there?
Exit full screen view, and you should be able to.
Okay. I think this is... Okay, I might have to, let's see here. I'll just keep this up, and then, yeah, if you don't mind reading the questions for me once they start coming in, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Hi, Rachel. I have a question.
Hi there.
So my major is accounting. However, I always wanted to volunteer for the Peace Corps ever since I was young. And I find it a little difficult with the different sectors that Peace Corps offers, tying that into my major. Is there like a specific, like if say I wanted to go into agriculture or environment, but I have an accounting background, would that deter me in any way?
first of all, for the accounting majors, you know, really specifically, the community economic development sector is one of the sectors that does have like a major or finance majors that can utilize the specific major discipline for that. But again, if you are looking at like, you know, I think you mentioned and health, was it? Or agriculture, I think.
Yeah, agriculture.
Agriculture.
Or really just, you know, I'm open to any of it. Just,
Sure. Honestly, there's so many ways to do this. So I think a lot of our agriculture posts, for example, as well, since you know, it does turn into a feature listing, and since we have a lot of demand for that sector too, like you can also essentially do a little bit of organic gardening or get involved with the local nursery gardening place to gain those skills. A lot of our ag posts as well, for example, might have a 6-month requirement of doing personal gardening, and even just with those personal gardening skills, you can become an agriculture volunteer. I would kind of say that's kind of where our minimum requirements start, all the way to having a forestry degree, or, you know, to apply to the ag post. But I would encourage you, Jennifer, to like take a look at the programs and see what the requirement skills are. And again, so a lot of our programs, they have a requirement of having a bachelor's degree and some interest in that sector. Some of our programs even just say having a bachelor's degree, and then they will list the desired skills, such as 30 hours of tutoring or experience working with a youth in a nonprofit organization. So they will list out like specific kind of an idea of what type of volunteers that they would like for that post. But I would definitely encourage you to check out the programs. And again, Jennifer, if you wanted to connect with me, I would be happy to, you know, hear more about you and then see which sectors might be of a good fit.
Okay, great. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Awesome. Thank you.
Another question that came in is, are there always continuous departure dates? For example, will there be departures to apply for that leave the summer of 2021?
Yes. And so, yes, we will have continuous departure dates. And for the summer 2021, yes, so we will have, you can see here the departure dates. If it's a July to September depart by, then the application deadline for those programs will be January 1st of 2021. And I believe those programs will get posted on our website in August. So definitely by the time the summer rolls around for this year, feel free to check out the position. And another thing to note as well for those of you is that every 3 months, our website will get posted with new programs. So that's every 3 months. Those will all have different departure dates. So anytime that really works with your timeline and your schedule and availability, you can start your application at that time as well.
Are there any other questions for Rachel? You can submit them in the chat box. Okay. I think that wraps it up then. Rachel, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate you going virtual at such a fast pace. And for all the students who joined us too, thank you so much. We know you have a lot going on with online classes, so thanks for taking the time, and I'll follow up with all the information in email as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey, and thank you all for attending. It was such a pleasure talking with you all.
Thank you, Rachel.